Hello art friends, Melisa here. Today I'm sharing my second project in my fall series using Shawn Petite Stencils. I have a couple more fall ideas, so stay tuned to my channel if you love fall like I do and need more inspiration. If you missed the first video in this series, check the description box below the video. That's where you'll find a link to that project as well as a list of all the supplies. If you need to see photos to help you create this project, check my blog. If you're inspired to purchase stencils from Shawn, I would appreciate you shopping through my affiliate link in the description box. There's no extra charge to you for doing so. Sorry for the lighting issue in the first part. It does get better after the background was completed. Alright, so let's get started. I created this project on a wood plaque I purchased at Hobby Lobby. It has a great decorative beveled edge to it. I started by applying one coat of Americana warm white acrylic paint. I'm using a 6x6 stencil. It's called Modern Pattern 6. I'm using a makeup sponge to apply the paint, and the first paint I tried was called Milky White, but it looked a little too yellow. So I switched to a warm gray by Master's Touch. It doesn't look gray at all though, it's more of a tan color. I also used an iridescent rich copper by Loft. I'm going to apply the paint in a random spotty pattern. I want parts of the background to peek through what will mostly be white. So I'm going to apply the paint, let it dry, and then I'll go back over with white gesso. I took pictures along the way, so if you need to see some detailed photos, you can get that on the blog. I'm going to try to do better about posting the videos over on my blog from here on out as well. You can now get blog updates directly to your email if you'd like. It would kind of be like getting a newsletter from me, and you'd be notified of all new videos and projects. So usually I wait until I'm done stenciling to start knocking it back with the gesso, but right here I'm already doing that. So I'm adding the gesso over the stencil as well. I didn't want the stenciled pattern to be all one color. I wanted variation in shades as well, and adding the gesso achieves that. I'm going to continue the same process across the front of the plaque until it's completely covered with the pattern. I was trying to figure out how to line the stencil up. I finally end up overlapping it. I love the way this pattern looks, but it's a little too bold for my focal points. They won't really stand out if I put them on top of the pattern like it is right now. So now I'm going to start knocking it back with some gesso. I want little pieces of this to just kind of peek through the background. The gesso is a little transparent, so it is going to take multiple coats in some areas to achieve that look. And again, this too is just kind of intuitive and random. So my first fall project, I basically just adhered a piece of collage paper to the background and didn't have to do a lot of extra steps for it. This has an irregular shape, so that really wouldn't work very well for this particular project. All right, so the first layer of gesso was dry. Now I'm coming back in with a second application. And now you'll really be able to see some of that pattern disappearing a little bit. Instead of shortening this step, I'm going to leave all the footage in so you can see the transformation and what a difference taking the time to apply the gesso makes. If you don't want to watch all of this section, you can skip ahead to 4 minutes 45 seconds. The gesso gives it a dreamy look. I love how this turned out. I decided to add more interest to the background by stamping a script image. I'm using a cling mount stamp because it's easier to bend it and just get a partial image. But I'll go back over again with a little bit of gesso to make it look a little more random. I also apply the ink to the stamp in an irregular way as well to help get a partial image. I'll stamp the images several times before reloading it with ink so that some of the images are lighter or more faded appearing. The ink I'm using is made by Palette. The color is Noir Black. It's acid-free, archival, and non-fading. It says to heat set it if you use it on glass, fabric, wood, plastic, metal, or clay. Now I'm pouncing on some gesso, knocking that script image back a little bit to get that dreamy look with that as well. Hopefully you'll be able to see how all these little details with the background help give it that wonderful distressed look. All right, time to move on to the pumpkin. I'm using the pumpkin round stencil and a piece of collage paper from one of Shawn's collage packs. It's called Create Your Own Life. And again, links to supplies are going to be in the description box below the video, and I would appreciate you shopping through my affiliate link. I started by pouncing on some yellow oxide, but it wasn't spreading very well and it was drying really quick. So when I start adding the pumpkin color orange, I'll use some Liquitex glazing medium. It extends the open time and also makes the paint a little more translucent so you can still visualize some of the collage paper underneath the paint. In my first fall project of this series, I eliminated the stencil gaps and used a brush to paint my pumpkin. I'm going to leave the gaps on this project and mostly sponge on the paint. My goal was to not only share projects with you, but also share some different techniques you can use with stencils along the way as well. Here I'm just showing you how I pulled some of the glazing medium into the orange and mixed it together before sponging it on. The name of the stencil I'm using on my project today is called Pumpkin Rounds. Shawn has 4 different stencils with pumpkins, so I'm thinking she must love pumpkins as much as I do. The names of the different stencils are Pumpkins Variety, Pumpkins Round, Pumpkins Tall, and Pumpkins Flat. What's great about creating your own fall decor is all the options with style and color. For instance, I'd love to have a pumpkin decor in my bathroom, but the colors are lavender and white. So I wanted to add some highlights to my pumpkin, but I used gesso. That was a big mistake. It's really not looking all that great at this point. So I grabbed a stiff-haired bristle brush and tried to spread it out some. And then I started adding some highlights with some Liquitex Indian Yellow heavy body paint. When shopping for stencils on Shawn's site, make sure you pay attention to the size. Some stencil designs come in 2 sizes, 8 by 10 or 12 by 16. All the stencils I'm using today are the 8 by 10 versions. I'm just tracing where the stem should be so I can paint that on. So here's a close-up of the pumpkin. See the darker areas? That's the collage paper peeking through the paint. I love how it adds some uniqueness to the pumpkin. And again, I can see that because I used some Liquitex glazing medium with the orange paint and it made it a little translucent. Now I'm using a ruler to make sure the pumpkin is centered horizontally. The next stencil I'll be using is the Paris Flourish one, and I'm going to use it horizontally. So now I'm using the ruler to create a center line that will allow me to position the stencil right in the middle of the plaque. I'm applying burnt umber with a makeup sponge. The secret to getting crisp images is the less is more rule. I dip my sponge in the paint, then tap it off before adding it over the stencil. You can always go back and add a second layer of color if you need to. Oh my gosh, did you guys see Shawn's project for her Sunday inspiration this past Sunday? It is a gorgeous fall piece. She created a pot of mums and a water pitcher with leaves and cotton stems sitting on a table that was absolutely amazing. I'll put a link to that in the description box below as well. Next, you're going to flip the stencil around and complete the same process on the other side of the pumpkin. I used black ink and a makeup brush to add Grateful to the front of my pumpkin. I love the crisp lines you get with the makeup brush and ink. You guys, my heart is broken because I just learned recently that distress inks are not light fast, which means they fade. I guess the question is how long will it take them to fade? I wasn't able to find any more information about it though, so if any of you are educated on this, leave me a comment below. The name of this stencil is Fall Words 1. Shawn has another stencil with fall phrases on it called Fall Words 2. It includes the phrases apple cider, crackling fire, crunchy leaves, crisp mornings, chilly nights, cozy sweaters, and pumpkin everything. There were a couple of areas where I had too much paint on my sponge and it smeared under the stencil. The way I fixed that was by adding a little gesso over it, then re-stenciling that part of the image. You can see the white peeking through the stencil. There were also some fuzzy edges here and there that needed to be smoothed out, and I used a 10/0 round brush to do that. Next, I stenciled and cut out my leaves. I'm using the Fall Leaves with Mask stencil. I stenciled the leaves on some scrap collage paper. I used burnt umber and iridescent rich copper. I'll hand cut these out and then adhere them to the front of the plaque. This is a visual example of the stamp I used to create some texture on the leaves. It's a small 2 by 2 inch clear stamp that has tiny little details that make it perfect for stamping on these little leaves. I purchased it at Simon Says Stamp, I think for about $2, and it's made by Prima. This certainly isn't necessary, but it really adds a lot to the leaves. Now I'm adding a little more detail by inking the edges of the leaves with black ink. This is another detail that doesn't take long to do, but adds so much to the look of the leaves, especially since some of the leaves will be overlapping others. After fussing with the leaves and figuring out where I wanted them, it was time to glue everything down. I used Aleene's tacky glue and also used some 3D foam tape with some of the leaves. It pops up some of the edges, giving the piece more dimension. Well, that's it for today, art friends. I have at least one and maybe two more fall-themed projects using stencils to share with you. So make sure you stop back by or hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it to get notified. Another option is to hop on over to the blog and subscribe via FeedBlitz, and you'll get email notifications every time I post on my blog, and that's where I'll be posting my videos as well. I'll post a link to that playlist below as well. If you're inspired by today's project, I would appreciate you giving it a thumbs up. See you next time.